Nassir Amit, also known as the Flesh Tearer, was the captain of the Blood Angels' 5th Company during the course of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, who in time would go on to become the founder of the Flesh Tearers chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. Amit was a warrior who would gain a level of infamy and notoriety throughout his legion for both his unprecedented brutality and sheer ferocity in combat, with such behaviour being considered by many to be somewhat extreme, if not outright barbaric. This extraordinary viciousness demonstrated by Amit, in conjunction with the custom-made serrated combat knife that he would carry, would earn him the nickname of Flesh Tearer, a moniker that Amit would wholeheartedly embrace. This would even lead to Amit arming the warriors under his command with custom-forged flaying knives that were similar to his own. Unlike the majority of his fellow Blood Angels, who held an appreciation for artistry and beauty, even to the point where various decorative touches would be applied to both their armour and weaponry, Amit by contrast appeared to care little for such ostentatious ornamentation. As a result, much to the dismay of his battle brothers, Amit would often ignore the cosmetic damage sustained by his armour, leaving it pockmarked with a series of blade scars and bullet holes. As befitting a warrior of Amit's temperament, the Flesh Tearer would become infamous throughout his legion for his blunt and brutally honest nature, even during times of relative peace. While his fellow legionaries would often be appalled by his lack of decorum, Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels Legion, would come to value Amit's honesty and willingness to speak the truth, even if such knowledge would prove distressing or otherwise uncomfortable, for Amit believed that such course of action was simply the right thing to do. During the earliest days of the Horus Heresy, it would be Nassir Amit who would first suggest to Sanguinius that the Primarch's beloved brother, Horus Lupercal, the War Master of the Imperium, had turned traitor. Sanguinius would lash out at Amit in anger, believing such a notion to be impossible, and would demand that the Flesh Tearer retract his statement. Amit, however, would choose to stand by his accusations, which would in time be proven correct. Following the events of the Horus Heresy and the introduction of the Codex Astartes, Nassir Amit would become the founder and first chapter master of the Flesh Tearers, though Amit himself had become enraged by the decision to split the legions into smaller chapters. Like their founder, the warriors of the Flesh Tearers chapter would swiftly gain a level of notoriety for their savagery and ferocity, which would continue to persist even 10,000 years later. Amit would go on to lead his chapter in various campaigns against a multitude of different foes, including separatist human civilizations and Xenos warbands. Amit would even succeed in banishing a bloodthirster of Khorne, one which claimed to be a son of the demon Kabanda, in single combat. Eventually, the Flesh Tearers would pursue an orc warband to the world of Cretacia, a death world populated by a variety of highly dangerous and gargantuan insectoid and reptilian organisms. The chapter would discover that this world was also home to a primitive but strong human population, one that not only survived in this hellish environment, but positively thrived. Nassir Amit would then choose to invoke his chapter's right of conquest, claiming Cretacia as the new homeworld for his Flesh Tearers. At some indeterminate point in time after the conquest of Cretacia, Amit would leave the world aboard the chapter's battle barge, the Victus, never to be heard from again. While the ship itself would eventually be recovered by the chapter, Amit had mysteriously vanished without a trace, and only a portion of the ship's data logs would remain intact. The remainder of the ship's data tracts, including those records that would have detailed Amit's final hours, would be corrupted beyond recovery, leaving his final fate unclear. So what fate could have befallen Nassir Amit? Since Nassir Amit had left Cretacia aboard the chapter's battle barge, it would appear that the most likely explanation is that Amit had perished during some unknown conflict. The fact that his body was never recovered could potentially be a result of the Flesh Tearer leading an assault against an unknown enemy before he became lost in some unforeseen cataclysm, such as the destruction of a ship that Amit could have potentially boarded during this hypothetical engagement. The idea that Amit had fallen in battle is partially supported within the audio drama Hunger. Gabriel Seth, the current chapter master of the Flesh Tearers during the 41st millennium, would lead a strike force tasked with boarding a space hulk that had materialized within the Korathos system so as to purge it of Gene Stealer infestation. It was during this mission that Seth would discover that one of the ships that comprised the mass of this hulk was an ancient Flesh Tearers vessel. This vessel contained within it a genetically sealed reliquary, which could only be opened by the DNA of a Flesh Tearer. After unlocking this reliquary, Seth would discover that the chamber contained within it none other than Nassir Amit's Terminator helmet. This helmet was noted to have been scored and pitted with numerous bullet holes and blade marks, with one eye lens being cracked while the other was missing entirely. This would appear to suggest that Amit could have fallen in battle, with only his helmet being recovered by his battle brothers, who in turn would inter it within this ship's reliquary as it attempted to make the journey back to Cretacia, only for the vessel to become part of a gargantuan space hulk at some indeterminate point during its voyage. While this hypothesis is little more than speculation and conjecture, the Terminator helmet that Gabriel Seth recovered from the space hulk could be the key to unraveling Nassir Amit's final fate. Indeed, Seth would don the helmet himself in hopes that its various inbuilt cogitators still functioned to some degree. They did. After viewing the footage recovered from the helmet's databanks, Gabriel Seth would fall unconscious. Seeing what the helmet had done to his chapter master, Harahel, a warrior of the chapter's first company, would destroy the relic before it could be brought back to Cretacia, an act that would enrage the chaplain, Apollos. After regaining consciousness, Seth would recall what he had seen whilst wearing Amit's helm. Seth witnessed what he described as a universe of blood, a landscape of gore-soaked rocks, crimson clouds, deserts of skulls, and burning tornadoes of rage. But the one thing that disturbed Seth most of all was that he had gazed upon the face of Amit himself, whose voice was described as that of a violent god. Seth would then tell Apollos that he merely saw the end. While these images clearly unsettled Gabriel Seth, it's difficult to ascertain what this vision of Nassir Amit truly means. Given the environment described in this found footage is that of blood and skulls, this would suggest that Nassir Amit is currently within the realm of Khorne, the chaos god of bloodshed and slaughter. As such, it would appear that as they made their journey through the warp, Amit's forces had somehow become transported to the Blood God's domain. Because of this, Amit could potentially be fighting against hordes of demonic creatures even to this day, and perhaps even gave his helm to one of his battle brothers in hopes that they could escape and, in turn, inform the remainder of the chapter of their fate. But there is a darker possibility. Could the founder of the Flesh Tearers, now stranded within the realm of Khorne, have succumbed to the effects of the Black Rage? The Black Rage is one of two major flaws found within Sanguinian Gene Seed, with the rage being a result of the psychic death scream of Sanguinius himself after he was slain by Horus during the final hours of the Horus heresy. Those who succumb to the rage become little more than violent and insane berserkers, believing themselves to be Sanguinius as he battled against Horus upon the vengeful spirit. It would be fair to presume, given Khorne's status as a god of blood and conflict, that the sheer amount of carnage and butchery throughout the Blood God's realm could have been the figurative straw that broke Amit's back, resulting in him succumbing to the Black Rage. Those who are susceptible to the effects of the rage are indeed more likely to succumb to it during moments of extreme stress or upon the field of battle, and since the realm of Khorne is said to be one of mass slaughter and unending war, it wouldn't be entirely unfeasible for Nassir Amit to fall to damnation in such a place. If this were indeed the case, then it would be fair to assume that Amit will use the rage within him to tear through every abomination that he encounters until death finally claims him. But there is an alternative fate that could have befallen Amit, one that is arguably just as, if not more, horrific. Since Amit was stated to now have the voice of a violent god, as well as being located within the realm of Khorne, could it be possible that the founder of the Flesh Tearers had succumbed to chaotic corruption? It's well known that Khorne has a strong fascination with the gene sons of Sanguinius, and has shown a desire to claim the chapters of the blood for himself, as evident with the events that unfolded upon Signa's Prime during the course of the Horus heresy. The Flesh Tearers themselves are also notable for suffering from the effects of the Black Rage and the Red First with a greater intensity than most other Blood Angel successor chapters, and this flaw has resulted in some members of the chapter falling to the predations of Chaos. For example, within the novella Sons of Wrath, the Flesh Tearers librarian, Nuriel, would fall victim to demonic possession after heeding the words of a spectral figure known as the Warrior in Blood. As such, it's not entirely unfeasible that Nassir Amit could have also succumbed to the influence of Khorne due to the intense rage and bloodlust that the Flesh Tearer desperately sought to control within him. Amit was also known for harboring an intense hatred towards the Ultramarines Primarch Rubicante Guilliman following the introduction of the Codex Astartes, a hatred that could have potentially festered within him until it bore corrupted fruit many centuries later, as detailed with the following quote from the novella Sons of Wrath.
Rubicante Guilliman. Guilliman the tactician. Guilliman the warrior. History will remember the Primarch of the Ultramarines by many titles. To us of the blood he will have only one, Guilliman the Butcher. With law and edict, Guilliman ripped the heart from the legions. Even his own sons were not spared his treachery. Where Horus had sought to use a hammer blow, Guilliman used a duelist's blade. In the end the result was the same. Brother became cousin, cousin became exile. Guilliman's new chapter, his beginnings, was a sundering to all that had come before. Stripped of honor and tithe, of history and deed, we were all of us undone, bastards of war and victory. We were angels no more.
Some have even suggested that Nassir Amit had not only fallen to the worship of Khorne, but had ultimately been slain by none other than the warrior known as Khorne the Betrayer. Within the audio drama Chosen of Khorne, Tarugar, the leader of a World Eaters warband named the Devourers, would issue a blood challenge to the Chaos Lord Argus Brond for the right to lead a blood crusade in order to win the Blood God's favour. To this end, Tarugar would appoint a champion to fight on his behalf, selecting a warrior from his ranks known simply as the Flesh Tearer. This so-called Flesh Tearer was described as being a devolved and monstrous descendant of Sanguinius, though as to how he came to join the ranks of the Devourers remains unknown. In response, Brond, who initially intended to fight the duel himself, would ultimately allow Khorne the Betrayer to fight in his stead, with Khorne wanting to claim a skull worthy of his patron god. Despite proving himself to be a vicious and capable foe in combat, the Flesh Tearer would prove to be no match for Khorne's skill and sheer brute rage, and would ultimately be slain by the Betrayer. Because this traitorous son of Sanguinius bore the epithet of Flesh Tearer, some have suggested that this warrior was none other than Nassir Amit, which in turn would mean that Amit had met his end at the hands of the Betrayer. However, despite sharing the same moniker, it seems unlikely that the Flesh Tearer slain by Khorne is the same Flesh Tearer as Nassir Amit due to a number of reasons. The first of which is due to the weaponry and equipment used by both warriors. The Flesh Tearer that fought against Khorne was described as wearing a helmless suit of black power armor which had its chapter heraldry crudely hacked away, and wielding a two-handed chain glaive. Nassir Amit, by contrast, upon his disappearance was, as mentioned earlier, clad in a suit of Terminator armor, with the suit integrating a pair of chain fists with inbuilt stormbolters. Because of this fact alone, it would appear unlikely that Amit would have chosen to relinquish his Terminator armor in favour of mere power armor. That being said, however, according to the 9th edition Blood Angels Codex, the Flesh Tearers have within their possession a suit of Terminator armor known as the Crimson Plate, which is thought to have once been worn by Nassir Amit himself, although the veracity of such claims remain unconfirmed, being little more than rumour and speculation at this point. However, the second major problem with the idea of this so-called Flesh Tearer being Nassir Amit is due to the simple fact that the Betrayer did not recognize this warrior as being Amit specifically, despite the fact that Khorne had met and even fought against Amit multiple times in the past. As shown within the short story Virtues of the Suns, Amit and Khorne, during the events of the Great Crusade, would face off against one another in an honor duel after the World Eaters and Blood Angels had brought the desert world of Basque into compliance. While Khorne would initially claim the advantage, Amit would ultimately prove to be the victor. Khorne would then demand for Amit to finish him off, but the Flesh Terror would instead choose to simply walk away, stating that their fight had ended in a draw. As a result, one would imagine that if the Flesh Terror that Khorne had slain was indeed Nassir Amit, he would have no doubt recognized him as being the man who had fought him to a draw, especially due to the fact that Space Marines are known to sport eidetic memories. As such, the reason as to why the warrior Khorne killed also bore the moniker of Flesh Terror could be due to something as simple as that he was formerly of the Flesh Terror's chapter, or simply in reference to his savagery in combat. Indeed, as Khorne faced off against this so-called Flesh Terror, he would remark that he was also a Flesh Terror, though as a literal terror of flesh as opposed to a son of Sanguinius. In either case, it is still possible that Nassir Amit could have fallen to the Blood God's influence, becoming a champion or even a demon prince of Khorne. In the case of the latter, it is even possible that such ascension to demonhood could have occurred against Amit's will, as such events are not entirely unprecedented. Within the novel Warden of the Blade, General Verdun Glass of Sandava II's Planetary Defense Force would find herself becoming transformed into a demon prince of Slaanesh, despite the fact that she had battled against the forces of Chaos. While she battled fiercely against the legions of Slaanesh, it was due to the pleasure that Glass took in battling against the demons laying siege to her homeworld, which led to the Chaos God gifting the general with the gift of demonhood after she had been crushed to death by falling masonry. Given the rage and thirst for blood that Nassir Amit struggled to control on a daily basis, it is certainly a distinct possibility that Amit could have been slain in battle, only to have unwittingly achieved apotheosis upon his death. But given that Amit's helmet was destroyed, along with the records it contained, we may never know the truth regarding the fate of the first Flesh Terror. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.